Be Me, 17, name's Daniel. My entire life has been curated, not in a rich kid, everything handed to me way. More like a lab rat in a long-running social experiment. The lead scientist is my mother, Eleanor. We live in a minimalist, beige apartment that smells faintly of kale and self-satisfaction. There is no father in the picture. He apparently failed to deconstruct his inherent patriarchal tendencies sometime before I was born. This is the only explanation I ever got, usually delivered with the same tone someone would use to describe a faulty appliance. My mother's job is hard to explain to normal people. She's a DEI consultant for tech companies. She spends her days on Zoom calls, talking in a calm, authoritative voice about creating safe spaces, interrogating privilege, and fostering inclusive dialogues. Our home is the ultimate safe space, so safe that almost nothing from the outside world is allowed in. My existence is her magnum opus, her proof of concept. The project is to raise a male who is completely free of toxic masculinity. This means my childhood was different. No competitive sports. That would foster aggression and a win-at-all-costs mentality. Instead, I did non-competitive yoga and mindful movement workshops. No action figures. They were tools of patriarchal violence. I had a collection of gender-neutral wooden blocks and ethically sourced fabric dolls with ambiguous features. Video games were completely forbidden. She once wrote an article for some online publication about how they were murder simulators that desensitize boys to violence against women. My screen time was limited to watching approved documentaries about climate change or the history of the suffrage movement. My diet was also part of the project. No red meat, as it's linked to aggression, mostly plant-based, organic, and locally sourced. Every meal felt like a political statement. School was homeschooling. She couldn't risk a public school undoing all her hard work and exposing me to problematic peer dynamics. So, my only social interaction was with her and her circle of friends, who were all basically clones of her. They would come over for vegan dinners, drink organic wine, and talk about their work. They'd look at me and nod approvingly. "You've done such an incredible job, Eleanor. He's so gentle and thoughtful." I learned early on to just smile and nod, to be the perfect exhibit. They saw a quiet, sensitive boy. They didn't see the pressure cooker building inside. My only escape was the internet. She wasn't a complete Luddite. She understood I needed a computer for my education. But it was locked down tighter than a military base. Content filters, keyloggers, browsing history checks every night. For years, I played her game. I visited the websites she approved of, read the articles she sent me, and acted like I was completely absorbed in her world. Around the time I was 14, I started getting smart. I learned about Linux, virtual machines, and VPNs from watching heavily vetted tech tutorials she thought were for my coding lessons. I set up a VM on my machine, a hidden operating system she couldn't see. One click, and my screen would revert to the approved homeschool desktop. It was my portal to the real world. Late at night, when the house was silent, I would become Cypher. Just a random username I picked. It felt fitting. I was decoding a world I was never meant to see. I lurked on forums. I read about things normal teenage boys liked: cars, video games, movies with explosions, working out. It was like reading about an alien civilization. I eventually got into online gaming. I had to use a cheap low-spec laptop I bought with saved-up gift money from my grandmother, playing on the lowest possible settings. The games were everything she hated: team-based shooters, strategy games. I wasn't very good at first, but I loved it. For the first time, I felt like part of a team. The other guys on Discord didn't know I was Project Daniel. To them, I was just Cypher. We'd joke around, complain about school, and plan our strategies for the next match. They would talk about their lives, their girlfriends, their part-time jobs, their problems with their dads. It all sounded so normal, so messy and real. I never talked about my own life. I just said my parents were strict. They didn't pry. It was an unspoken rule. We were there to escape our real lives for a few hours. This secret world was the only thing keeping me sane. The contrast between my two lives was jarring. By day, I was having conversations with my mother about the problematic nature of the word guys as a collective noun. By night, I was on a Discord server with a bunch of dudes from all over the world, laughing at stupid memes and coordinating virtual attacks. I was living a double life, and the stress of keeping it hidden was immense. But the freedom was worth it. The inciting incident, the thing that kicked everything into high gear, happened a little after I turned 17. My cheap laptop was on its last legs. I couldn't run any of the newer games my friends were playing. I needed a real PC. Or at least a decent graphics card for the desktop my mother had provided for school. I knew asking for it would be a battle. I spent a week planning my approach. I couldn't say it was for gaming. I built a whole presentation around needing it for advanced 3D modeling and data visualization for an online course in architecture she had approved. I rehearsed my lines. I had charts and articles ready to back me up. I presented my case one evening during our designated family meeting time. She listened patiently, with a small, unreadable smile on her face. When I was done, she took a sip of her herbal tea. "Daniel," she said, her voice dripping with calm disappointment. "I thought we had moved past this." I was confused. Moved past what? This need for consumption, this desire for more, more, more. It's a classic trait of unchecked male entitlement. She explained to me, for the next 30 minutes, how my request was not about a school project. It was a manifestation of the patriarchal desire to acquire and dominate. My desire for a better graphics card was, in her words, ideologically identical to a country wanting a bigger army. I just sat there, my carefully prepared arguments turning to ash in my mouth. There was no arguing with her. It was like trying to debate with a brick wall that thinks it's a philosopher. The final move was a checkmate. She opened her laptop, went to a charity website, one for supporting women in developing countries, and made a donation. The amount was the exact price of the graphics card I had asked for. She turned the screen to me, showing the confirmation receipt. "This is a much better use of our resources, don't you think? This is turning your privilege into a tool for positive change." She smiled, genuinely pleased with herself. She had just taught me a valuable lesson. I just nodded. "Yes, you're right." But inside, something snapped. It wasn't anger. It was a cold, quiet clarity. She didn't see me. She saw a symbol, a project. My desires and needs were just data points to be corrected and recalibrated. I was an object. That night, as Cypher, I didn't play any games. I started planning my escape. I knew I had about a year until I turned 18. 1 year to become completely independent from her, in secret. The first problem was money. I had none. My allowance was a pittance, and she monitored my bank account, which was a joint account, of course, like a hawk. I couldn't get a normal part-time job. My homeschooling schedule was too rigid, and she would never approve of me working at a capitalist enterprise like a fast food chain. My online friends gave me the answer, without even knowing they were doing it. One of them, a guy from the UK, was a freelance coder. He would talk about the small jobs he did for people online, fixing websites, writing simple scripts. I was already decent at coding from the approved courses my mother had me take. It was the one useful skill she had accidentally given me. I spent the next month diving deep. I learned about freelancing platforms, about cryptocurrencies, about setting up anonymous online payment accounts. I created a new identity for myself online. Cypher wasn't just a gamer anymore. He was a freelance web developer. I built a portfolio by doing free work for a few small, obscure forums. Then I took my first paid gig. It was a simple job, just fixing some CSS on a guy's blog. He paid me $50 in crypto. I remember staring at that transaction in my digital wallet. It was the first money I had ever earned for myself. It felt more real than any allowance she had ever given me. It was the first brick in the wall of my new life. The next year was the hardest of my life. My schedule was brutal. From 8 a.m. to 4 p.m., I was Daniel, the perfect son. I did my schoolwork, I attended the online workshops, I had meaningful discussions with my mother. From 4 p.m. to 9 p.m., I did my volunteering and other approved activities. But from 10 p.m. to 3 a.m., I was Cypher. I was jacked up on cheap coffee, sitting in the dark, coding for clients from all over the world. I took any job I could get. Website maintenance, debugging Python scripts, creating WordPress themes. The money started to trickle in. $50 here, $100 there. I never converted it to cash. It all stayed in crypto, a growing number in a wallet only I had the keys to. I was perpetually exhausted. I had dark circles under my eyes. My mother noticed, but she interpreted it through her own lens. "You're spending too much time reflecting on systemic injustices, aren't you? It can be emotionally draining. I'm so proud of your empathy." I just agreed with her. Her complete inability to see what was actually happening was my greatest asset. While she was writing articles about my heightened emotional intelligence, I was learning about things like how to rent an apartment with no credit history. While she was praising me to her friends for rejecting consumer culture, I was researching how to buy a bus ticket without using a credit card. Every piece of information was another step out the door. I started to build a detailed plan. The Exodus plan, I called it in my head. I picked a city, far away in a different state, with a low cost of living and a decent tech scene. I researched bus routes, short-term housing options, and job markets. My online life was my training ground. I learned how to talk to people, how to negotiate prices for my work, how to be self-reliant, skills my mother had never intended for me to learn. Her world was about theory and ideology. My world was about practical survival. Meanwhile, her career was taking off. She was invited to speak at a big DEI conference. Her keynote speech was titled, "Raising Allies, A Mother's Journey in Cultivating a Feminist Son." I was the star of the show, without even being there. She practiced her speech on me dozens of times. I had to sit there and listen to her describe my carefully controlled childhood as a beautiful, organic process of enlightenment. She talked about how our open and honest communication was the key to our relationship. It was surreal. I was listening to a completely fictional account of my own life. She would show slides with pictures of me as a child, holding a "Smash the Patriarchy" sign she had made for me at a protest. The audience at the conference apparently loved it. She got a standing ovation. After that, she became even more insufferable. She was a minor celebrity in her niche world. Her ego, which was already massive, inflated to the size of a hot air balloon. She started talking about writing a book. My entire life, packaged and sold as a manual for other progressive parents. That was a terrifying thought. My prison was about to become a blueprint for others. The closer I got to my 18th birthday, the more careful I had to be. I had saved up a decent amount of money, enough to live on for a few months while I found a stable job. I had a solid portfolio of freelance work. I had a plan. But I was getting paranoid. I started clearing my VM's cache every night. I used multiple layers of encryption for my planning files. I felt like a spy in my own home. The final push, the moment that erased any shadow of a doubt I had about leaving, came about a month before my birthday. It was a Tuesday night, I think. I was supposed to be in my room, reading an assigned text about post-colonial theory. I came out to get a glass of water. My mother was on the phone in the living room, her back to me. She was talking to one of her friends, her voice low and conspiratorial. I froze in the hallway, hidden in the shadows. "I know he's turning 18, she was saying, "but he's not ready for the world. He's too sensitive, too naive. I've sheltered him, and it's my responsibility to continue protecting him." There was a pause. I could faintly hear the tinny voice of her friend on the other end. "Of course, I've already spoken to a lawyer," my mother continued. "It's a simple process. We'll file for conservatorship, citing his severe social anxiety and lack of real-world skills. The doctors we use will sign off on it. He's in no state to manage his own affairs." My blood ran cold. Conservatorship. She wasn't planning to let me go. She was planning to put me in a legal cage. She was going to use the very isolation and helplessness she had engineered as a reason to control me forever. "It's for his own good, of course," she said, her voice softening into a tone of martyrdom. "He'll thank me for it one day. He just doesn't know what's best for him." I didn't hear any more. I backed away slowly, my heart hammering in my chest, and went back to my room. I sat on my bed in the dark, and for the first time, I think I truly hated her. It wasn't about rules or ideology anymore. This was about possession. She thought she owned me. The Exodus plan was no longer just a plan. It was a survival imperative. The final month was a blur of quiet, focused activity. I finalized every detail. I used a small portion of my crypto to anonymously purchase a prepaid debit card and had it sent to a P.O. box I'd rented under my online alias. I bought a new cheap burner phone and a bus ticket online for the day of my 18th birthday. I packed a single backpack. A A few sets of clothes, my laptop, a hard drive with all my important files, the burner phone, and the debit card. I hid the backpack in the back of my closet, under a pile of books she wanted me to read. On the outside, I was the most compliant I had ever been. I agreed with everything she said. I participated enthusiastically in our discussions. I told her how much I appreciated her guidance. I was playing the role of my life, and the closing night was approaching. She was completely oblivious. She was busy outlining the chapters of her upcoming book, The Feminist Son. The irony was so thick I could barely breathe. The morning of my 18th birthday started like any other day, with a lecture. We were eating our usual breakfast of avocado toast and fruit smoothies. Eleanor presented me with my gift. It was a small, neatly wrapped box. Inside was a first edition copy of a dense academic book about feminist theory from the 1970s. "It's a foundational text," she said, beaming. "I thought it was appropriate for your first day as an adult man committed to dismantling oppressive structures." I thanked her. I told her I couldn't wait to read it. I placed it carefully on the table. Then came the second part of the gift. She handed me a certificate. It was from one of her favorite charities. "In honor of your birthday," she announced, "I've made a substantial donation in your name to a program that provides re-education for men who have displayed problematic behaviors. So my birthday present was a book I would never read, and a donation to a cause that implied I was one misstep away from needing re-education myself. It was perfect. It was the most Eleanor thing she could have possibly done. She told me she had to go into the office for a few hours for an important meeting, but would be back in the early afternoon. We would celebrate properly then, with a homemade vegan carrot cake and a deep dive discussion on my goals for the next year. I told her that sounded wonderful. I gave her a hug. It felt like hugging a statue. I watched from the window as her hybrid car pulled out of the driveway. The moment it was out of sight, the Exodus plan officially began. There was no rush, no panic. Just a calm, methodical series of actions I had rehearsed in my mind 1,000 times. First, the backpack. I pulled it from its hiding spot. Everything was already packed. I did one final check. Laptop, hard drive, burner phone, the debit card, a change of clothes, a water bottle, and all the cash I had been slowly skimming from grocery money over the past year. It wasn't much, but it was untraceable. Next, my digital footprint. I sat down at the desktop computer, the one she monitored. I didn't just delete files. I had a program ready on a USB stick, a data shredder that overwrites files multiple times, making them completely unrecoverable. I dragged every document, every school project, every photo of me she had saved onto the desktop into the shredder. The process took about 20 minutes. 20 minutes of watching a progress bar slowly erase my entire documented life in that house. When it was done, I initiated a full factory reset of the operating system. By the time it was finished, it would be a blank slate, just like the day it came out of the box. Then, my old phone, the one she had given me and tracked. I didn't need a hammer, I just bent it, again and again, until the screen cracked and the casing snapped. I popped out the SIM card and cut it into tiny pieces with a pair of scissors. I dropped the fragmented phone and SIM card into a public trash can on my way out. The final step inside the house was the note. I took a single sheet of plain white paper from the printer. I wrote one sentence on it, in clear block letters. "The experiment is over. The subject is leaving." I didn't sign it. She would know who it was from. I folded the paper once and placed it in the exact center of the kitchen table. I took one last look around the beige, sterile apartment. It never felt like a home. It felt like a waiting room, and I was finally done waiting. I put my backpack on, walked out the front door, and didn't lock it behind me. There was nothing left in there for me to protect. I walked for 20 minutes to a bus stop that was not on my usual route. I turned on the burner phone for the first time. I had one number saved in it, the local taxi service. I took a cab to the main bus terminal downtown, paying in cash. I had my pre-purchased ticket on the phone, for a bus leaving in 1 hour. The destination was a city over 1,000 miles away. I sat in the terminal, just another anonymous person in a crowd of travelers. No one looked at me twice. I was just a young guy with a backpack. For the first time in my life, I felt completely invisible, and it was the most liberating feeling in the world. When the bus arrived, I got on, found my window seat, and put in my headphones. As the bus pulled out of the station and merged onto the highway, I allowed myself one look back at the city skyline. Then, I turned my head forward and didn't look back again. Eleanor got home around 3 p.m. She was humming, carrying a small box from the local vegan bakery, the carrot cake. The first thing she noticed was the silence. The apartment was always quiet, but this was a different kind of quiet. It was empty. She called my name, no answer. She probably figured I was in my room with headphones on, engaging with approved media. She went to my room, the door was open, the bed was made, the room was spotless, and I wasn't there. A flicker of annoyance, probably. I was supposed to be there for my celebration. She walked back into the main living area, and that's when she saw the piece of paper on the kitchen table. She picked it up, a confused look on her face. She unfolded it and read the words. I imagine her standing there for a long time, the sentence not quite making sense. It was like her brain couldn't process the input. The box with the cake slipped from her hand and hit the floor with a dull thud. The confusion would have then turned to panic. She would have grabbed her phone, her fingers fumbling, to call me. The call would go straight to a "this number is no longer in service" message. She'd check the tracking app for my phone. Device offline. She'd rush to the computer, the one she checked every night. She'd find it in the middle of a system reset. A blank screen with a corporate logo and a progress bar. Her window into my world, wiped clean. Then the real fear would set in. She would have checked the joint bank account she controlled. The balance was the same. I hadn't touched it. This would have confused her even more. If I had run away, how could I survive with no money? The idea that I could have my own resources, my own plan, was so alien to her that it probably didn't even enter her mind at first. Her world was built on the foundation of my total dependence on her, and that foundation was crumbling. After a few hours of frantic, fruitless searching, she did the only thing she could think of. She called the police. She reported me as a missing person. She probably used all the right buzzwords. Vulnerable, at risk, suffering from severe anxiety. An officer was dispatched to the apartment. He would have listened patiently to her story. He would have taken notes, and then he would have asked the crucial question. "Ma'am, when is his birthday?" She would have told him. "Today. He's 18 today." I can picture the officer's professional expression not changing, but a certain weariness entering his voice. He would have explained it to her calmly, that since I am now a legal adult, I cannot be considered a missing person unless there is evidence of foul play or a credible threat to my safety. He would have told her that an 18-year-old has the right to leave home, the right to not tell their parents where they are going, the right to cut off contact. Her arguments that I was not equipped to handle the world, that I was mentally fragile, would have been met with a polite, bureaucratic wall. "Ma'am, unless you have legal documentation proving he is mentally incompetent, like a conservatorship," that word would have hung in the air. The very legal cage she was planning for me was the one thing she didn't have yet. The officer would have left after filing a standard report that he knew would go nowhere, and Eleanor would have been left alone in her silent apartment, with a crushed cake on the floor and a single piece of paper that invalidated her entire life's work. The control was gone. For the first time, she had no idea where I was, what I was doing, or who I was talking to, and there was absolutely nothing she could do about it. In the weeks that followed, her carefully constructed world began to unravel. Her friends and colleagues started asking questions. How was Daniel's birthday? What are his plans for college? She built a lie, a flimsy, desperate one. She told everyone I had decided, on the spur of the moment, to take a gap year. I was on a digital detox and volunteer trip in a remote part of a South American country, helping an indigenous community build sustainable infrastructure. It was the perfect story for her social circle. It was noble, progressive, and conveniently explained why I was completely unreachable. No cell service, no internet. The lie worked for a little while. Her friends praised her for raising such a selfless, worldly son. But the cracks started to show. They'd ask to see pictures. She'd make excuses about the lack of connectivity. They'd ask which organization I was with. She'd name a real one, hoping no one would check. The book she was planning to write was put on hold indefinitely. How could she write a parenting guide when the subject of her study had vanished? Her confidence began to fray. Her public persona was built on being the mother of the perfect feminist son. Without me as Exhibit A, she was just another consultant with theories. The real humiliation was more gradual, a slow burn. Someone she knew had a cousin who worked for the very volunteer organization she claimed I was with. An innocent inquiry was made. The organization had no record of a Daniel with my last name. The news spread through her social circle not like a fire, but like a slow-moving stain. Whispers at dinner parties, confused text messages between friends. No one confronted her directly. That wasn't their style. Instead, a polite distance began to form. Invitations to speak on panels started to dry up. Consulting offers became less frequent. Her authority was based on a lie, and once that lie was exposed, the authority vanished with it. She had become a source of awkwardness, a quiet failure that everyone was too polite to mention, but too aware to ignore. She had lost her son, and in doing so, she had lost her identity. I never contacted her. I never looked back. I got off that bus in a new city where nobody knew my name. I used my savings to get a room in a shared house. I used my portfolio to get more freelance work. Within a few months, I had a steady income and a full-time remote job as a junior developer. I made friends, real ones. I joined a local hiking club. I started going to the gym. I bought a car. I learned how to be a person, not a project. I did all the toxic things she had warned me against. I competed with my friends in video games. I learned how to fix my own car. I ate a steak and enjoyed it. And the world didn't end. I didn't become an oppressor. I just became normal. Sometimes I wonder what she does now. I picture her in that silent beige apartment. The walls are probably still covered in feminist art. The bookshelf is probably still full of academic texts. I imagine her sitting on the sofa, scrolling through her old articles and conference talks online, watching a version of herself from the past, confident and praised, explaining to a captivated audience how to build a relationship with your son based on trust and open communication. She's probably watching it alone, in a house that's been silent for years, the expert on communication with no one left to talk to. Her greatest success story had become her most profound and most private failure. The experiment was over, and the results were not what she had predicted.